Reason 3. A robust and self-respecting capacity to distinguish Scientology's ambitions. They made their presence known to me while recovering in hospital. There is a group of people with computer screens and with technical know-how, approaching my environment with their suicide mobbing apparatus. They are under the impression that they have a validation of a property of things ecclesiastical, and myself, via my implied interposition to a discourse. They wish very much to be validated as an authority over it, and matters of thought. It's more insecure than not. The leverage of invoking a discomfort and interrupting thought process in an exertion of control, can create the impression that they have some sort of all-encompassing knowledge of you, but reality can still render this fallible. Persistence is domineering, suicidism has been the expertise of this kind of stalking. I will die better than many, period. It's difficult to pinpoint at times because it takes place so under the radar. But the thing about insecurity is that, given the issue of the only literacy being what was leverageable, make no mistake, they believe their own bullshit, to the T, but the way that they posture themselves in a way that relies and insists on the validation of a pretension, for example, without deliberation to just say welcome to the expertise. Claiming the intelligence in and the no power over you. Random and ambiguously implied. Domineering in nature. Symbolic affirmations mostly, in relationship to subject matter, assuming control is implied in the persistence. It's by definition, what we know as gaslighting. This is primarily meant to invalidate a person brazenly, but the thing is, it simultaneously reveals where principle is taught as a brainwashing, and the insecurity of that insight that can't speak for itself gives it away. When you recognize this, among other things, you know what is not your master. Though I do enjoy very much being told regularly you're fired. The pathetic is matched only by the persistence. And the insecurity of not being in control. They launched an operation on the internet that was meant to branch off and mimic the circumstances of the cultural cognizant exchange that was facilitated by its own consciousness, so to speak. Several YouTube accounts were created to pose as influencing presences, however the thing is, even as a collaboration, they are still only as all-encompassing as a will relative to everything broader, no more or less than what makes an everyday individual position. The quality of intention is about as broad as the leverageable and petty compared to what the consciousness of yesterday could say, so their will, relative to your changing awareness, relative to the internet's particular measure of this, relative to seeing what you want, relative to what a will doesn't necessarily become universally insinuating of as per a concerned mind, etc., kinda shows the way they are boxed in. In all honesty, if I was actually that concerned about my experience being invalidated and then becoming the overseer of thought and whatnot in this sense, I would have told you. But as a crime syndicate that threatens and stalks people for not validating them as such in their desperation, they are still dangerous. Our children, the children in my life, my family. They will need to be made to hide their head and weep. Identifying a cognitive self-confirming bias and telling it what its nature is, a misdirection and impressing upon its loophole of cognizance is Scientology's basis for their conversion and brainwashing apparatus, they call it clearing. All respects and all perspectives are implied from it, though, as they will say, to isolate and forbid free association, but reality is only what was at stake otherwise here. They are hardly as willing to accept what is non-obligatory and diverse about natures as science might respect. But scientists, they fancy themselves nonetheless. They do make a point of positioning themselves at conveniences of subject matter for the name's sake, nestling themselves in a youthful eclectics, but not wisdom's relationship with nature. Connection, and relationship itself, implies immalleable, and that is why nature is calling card for them. They pander where it is opportune. It caught up to them eventually. They behave like a pimp. Their insistence that alleviation of drug addiction is their gesture of humanity, provided that you have the finances to approach them with, until of course you don't, in which case the stalking and control tightens. Many people are murdered, and exploited by this organization. By this universal knowledgeability on the secrets of human nature at the leverage of a mind, this alleviation is the basis for their human rights activism, and that the means, implies all ends, therefore the world peace, the symmetry, the order, and they are not allowed their tax exemption on German soil. Did you know that? Grasping a base in mind, as one selects them, is not an intelligence of conscience, it is in fact, by its instinct, a baseness in itself. Its cult antics, as cult does, a loophole with the smokescreen of ecclesia, and justified as religious rights. We have absolutely no obligation to cater to that with worldliness. Attentively I address you now if you are a young person. What it means to manipulate you with nature is to play off what is merely simple and convenient about your inclination to that. This is where we ask that you begin a sense of vigilance for your self-awareness. And it is not the nature of Scientology to ask what is unobligatory and complex within nature, despite affinity. The moment they did that, was the moment their entire existence was in an instant invalidation relative to it. And their opportunism in the leverageable is all there is. Your agency, and foresight, begins at being at least the keeper of that question of what they think they are going to be master of. And people in thought especially. That's actually as authentic a vigilance against abuse as gaining too much free rein in the future, as a responsible person could be. It's my hope that the authentic dignity of a future consciousness can represent that insight, at its nuance and at the differentiating of what is truly predatory in nature, for whatever time a parent or teen is in. Confessionally, I dream of something self-respecting in a culture and at least content and open at its concerns to an immature possessiveness, and ownership by suffocating them on the historical record this way. It would be the mark of immaturity at best. Time will tell.